Hey, Bob.
Hello.
All right. See a few more joining in. Cool. So we've only got a few official things on the agenda, so I'm going to be leaning on the group of people who signed in and are on the call to add some topics to the discussion in the form of questions or comments. But what I do want to talk about is some of the announcements last week, and if people had heard about those, the new community site and feedback on that, and then also, Bob's on here to show off some of the new publishing features within the IDE, so that smart apps and device types can be sort of shared and released out into the public now. So, does anyone else have topics that they'd like us to cover that they can think of right now?
The only thing I have in mind is possible glitches that we've seen due to the release, and what things should we expect to be addressed or not? Because I know, like, say, for instance, Quirky kind of failed right after the release, and I'm not sure if it's due to the release itself or just coincidence, but just kind of what's going on behind all that.
Yeah, I wonder if Todd will join us today or not. I don't know much about the quirky things I saw on the forums. You posted some questions about the quirky stuff not working. So, there shouldn't have been things within the new releases that affected that, but there were a few things related to the release. That wasn't one of them. One thing got fixed quite quickly after the release. It was that people's dashboards were getting sort of cleared out. It looked like they had to hard quit the app and get the things back. But we fixed that. But I don't know. The quirky one I think is still an ongoing question as to what's going on. I should test it with some of my things.
Yeah. Well, I think on the day of the release, I was having even issues with the smart apps that I wrote or I had it myself, and they had like duplicate codes or two sets of codes. I had to erase an entire set in order for my smart app to even work.
So code changes. Did you actually say that the code duplicated itself within your IDE?
Yeah, it looked like there was basically two sets of codes, and there was even a little insert saying that make all modifications below this line. So it looks like it was intended, but I think all the additional code that was duplicated was supposed to be commented out, but it wasn't.
I haven't seen anything like that. Have you, Bob?
Yeah. I think I've seen one other case of that. It was actually the release before this one where we added the ability to completely bootstrap smart apps from the metadata, and as kind of a utility, we added some logic there where if you didn't have any metadata when you went into the editor for the first time, the idea was it would insert a section that had the new metadata so all you had to do was save it there. And I think the problem, at least the other case that I saw, there was a problem where certain kinds of syntax or semantic errors would cause it, rather than to just insert the new stuff, to duplicate the whole section of code. So I think that's what you're talking about, right? That in other words, you didn't have two different apps, but within the app, the code looked like it had been duplicated. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I think it was oriented. It was a problem with that migration, and if you continue to see problems with that, let us know, and we'll take a look at it. But
yeah, I ended up either deleting it or commenting it out, and it ended up working.
Yeah,
so I think it's fine. It's fine for me, but I didn't know whether or not this is like a widespread issue that would have to be addressed across the board for everybody else, because I had to manually do it on my end.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, like I say, this is the second instance that I know of, so I think it's not unique, but I don't think it was widespread either.
Good to know.
All right. There's another comment from Derek. Are multiple users able to tailor apps for their devices under one account? And so basically, if two people are using the same hub but get notifications for different apps that they choose, that is a big one as far as like roles and things where every account user doesn't have to get the push notifications, for example. Some of the people have been using IFT or SMS messages to like separate some of that out so that there's fewer alerts for some people or others, Derek. But I think that's on the roadmap for some things to address once we start rolling out different roles and permissions. All right. What do we got else? All right. So for the folks who are muted and whatnot, just feel free to chat in questions, and I'll try to keep looking at the chats as they come in. So, Bob, why don't you walk through some of this stuff? I think this is going to be a cool overview. If you can share your screen and show some of the new stuff. Lots more tools for publishing things, obviously, because before you could just publish things to yourself. Now with a bunch of stuff that's just come out, we can do more. So take it away, Bob.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about two things. One, the first is as Ben said, which is now just became live today, is the ability to submit smart apps or device types for publishing. And we talked about this for a long time, and we had a couple of one-offs and special cases that we handled, but there wasn't any general mechanism for everyone doing that. And so that actually has gone live today, and I'll walk through that. The second thing I was going to talk about a little bit and is not going live today, but will be soon, is we're looking at some integration to GitHub, between the IDE and GitHub, both for general kind of version control capabilities and also to make it easier to collaborate on open source smart apps and device types. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those things today. Let me share my screen here. And you should be seeing an IDE that's owned by a fictitious developer named Joe. Is everybody seeing my screen now?
Yep.
All right. So what you'll see now, if you log into the IDE yourself, you should see this, is that there'll be a link here that's my publication request, and this is going to list and give you a status of all the any requests to publish smart apps or device types you might have. And so to create a new one of these, you just click on this button here, create publication request. This is going to pop up this form, and it's going to, over to the left, it's going to give a list of all of your device types and smart apps. You'll notice that some of these, especially ones you've created a while ago, may be grayed out. That's because we're going to be requiring a namespace for all published smart apps and device types going forward. The idea is ultimately this will probably line up with people's GitHub usernames. And so in this case, Joe the developer has a Joe the developer GitHub username. And so we're going to give, there's no restriction on namespaces right now, but the convention is going to be to use the username of a GitHub account for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about the planned GitHub integration later. For now, this will let you select, one or more smart apps and device types. The idea is to keep these kind of, in cases where they're coupled, submit them together, but generally we're looking for individual submissions for individual apps. But if you have a LAN or cloud connected device type that has a service manager type app, that common pattern, you can submit both of these at the same time. And then on the right-hand side is the submission form. This is the first step. We're going to be making some enhancements to this to make it easier to use. We entertained the idea originally of actually using GitHub pull request in the GitHub site itself for doing this, but we wanted to keep it as simple as possible and not require people to be familiar with those tools. So this is, the submission process is native to the IDE. Give a title to your submission. And some sort of description. Now, scrolling down, there's the lawyer submitted this. Everything was done, all the code was done. The last thing that actually went in was the language from the lawyers. If you click on this, you can see the read through all the legalese if you're so inclined. There are no hidden changes here. You're retaining rights to this, but there are limitations of liability and all those sorts of things. You do need to accept these terms and conditions to go forward. It won't let you do that. You can now elect to designate this submission as either being something that is going to be open source, and in general, we're looking at device types being things that we think will be open sourced in most cases, because there really is a model where you'll have a whole lot of alternate, device type handlers for the same device type. SmartApps may or may not be, and the effect of checking this box is just to determine which GitHub repo this is going to go into. Eventually, there's a private repo that is only used to populate the platform, and where the source is never going to be shared. But the plan is to have a public repo, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And so you can decide whether or not to make this submission. Click next. It'll give you a chance here to review what you're looking at. Go back and make modifications if you want to, and then finally just click submit. One more chance to change your mind. And now this is going to go into the system. Dan Lieberman, who is not going to be on the call today, but is heading the group that's going to be reviewing these submissions. You can go back here and see the status of it at any time. There are going to be additional capabilities rolled out here in subsequent weeks for having a kind of a comment stream and the ability to have a dialogue within the IDE with the person reviewing the submission. If it's a community site, once the GitHub integration is done, if it's an open source site, there'll be a link that'll let you actually see the pull request that goes with that submission. And that's it from your point of view right now. That's the process. There's for device types, there's a certification process, code inspection and certification, but you'll be able to check here on the status of your submission, see when it's approved, and see when it's going to go live. And that's pretty much it for the submission UI right now. So before I go on to talk about more futures, this is in place now. I wanted to open it up and see if there are any questions about this process or anything that we should address now as far as submitting device types and smart apps for publication. Anyone? Okay. Then let's jump ahead. So as I said, this was just turned on in production now. You can go ahead and take a look at this, and if you have smart apps or device types that you like to submit now or in the future, please go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to jump ahead a little bit into talking about future, and by future I mean the next. I hope to be able to have this turned on by our next meeting in a couple of weeks, possibly even a little bit earlier. But besides that process for submitting smart apps, we're looking at integrating the IDE with GitHub for two reasons. One is just to provide version control capabilities for code that you're developing. If you're doing any kind of complex or even not that complex software development, it's nice to have a version control system and not be losing previous versions of your code when you're making edits. The second reason is that, as I said, we're planning to open source a large number of device types and smart apps. And we want to make it possible to have people contribute to those and to collaboratively evolve them and develop them. So for both of those reasons, we're going to be coming out with integration between the SmartThings IDE and GitHub. Once that's turned on, you'll see a link that will show up on either the device types or smart apps pages that will say enable GitHub integration. If you click on that link, it will take you to a step-by-step process for connecting your GitHub account. You need to have a GitHub account, but it can be a free one for connecting that to SmartThings. The first one is to go through an OAuth process to connect to authorize your account. The only permissions we're asking for at this point are identity, essentially your public data. So this is not at this point granting any kind of general access to your GitHub repository. It's just using it to validate that you do in fact own this GitHub account. And so if you click authorize, that'll complete the process, and it will take us back. It looks like I already had this. I got burned by the demo scenario here. I forgot to clear out my old repositories. Normally, it would take you to a separate a second page that would allow you to fork the open source repo. So since I didn't set up my demo properly to do that, I won't be able to demo that for you. But what I will do is before we roll this out, or in conjunction with rolling this out, we'll go through this again and lay out all of the steps. So the additional step would have been one of forking the repo, because what happens at this point, you can see now that there are a lot of controls here at the top that you didn't have before. There's the settings control that shows the repo you own. This is actually connecting to a fork of what will be, it's not public yet, but what will be the open source public SmartThings repo. Joe, the developer here, now has a fork. It's connected to this account, and this allows this is going to allow him to check things into the repo. If we go back and look at Smart Apps, here's the device type happened to already be in the repo. Here's it's color coded here. We still have some UI work to go on as far as displaying keys, but this is, green is an indication of a new file. This can be checked into the repo. This is actually a conflict. There's going to be an integrated diff tool that shows, looks like it's there's not actually a conflict there. It just has an empty file in the repo. But now the IDE is excuse me a minute. The IDE is connected to the GitHub repo. You can make changes. You can commit them to your fork of the repo. You can also and this is where I think it gets particularly interesting with collaborative development. We've always shared a large number of device types and smart apps in the kind of examples category, where you could create a new smart app and you could overwrite it with an example. But here, kind of more directly, you'll be able to look through and browse all of the open source apps. And so if there's something about the Z-Wave switch implementation, for instance, that's always bugged you and you'd like to make an update to that, you can actually pull that down. That's pulling that copy down from the repo. You can go in here and you can edit it. If you make an edit to it, I'll just make a small thing here as an example. You make an edit, there's an integrated diff tool that will show you the edits you made. You can then install this, test it yourself, make changes, and you can go through the same publication request process to submit these changes. And these are set up exactly like GitHub pull requests, and which is kind of designed for open source development. And so, not only a case of developing new smart apps and device types from scratch, but you can make enhancements and submit pull requests for enhancements for any of the published open source smart apps and device types as well. So I'll stop there and again see any questions about this or what's being planned.
I would have expected the question of like, where do I put in the price, but the monetization part of it, which we aren't prepared to answer right now. But no one's asking that.
Right. Well, everyone's going to be, for the good of the community, we'll be submitting everything as open source, I'm sure. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, we don't have information about monetization opportunities at this point. One other, as far as GitHub integration itself, besides this open source repo, you'll actually be able to connect your own private repos to the SmartThings IDE. When you do that, you do have to grant access for that one repo for us to be able to push commits into it. And the purpose for doing that is primarily for your own version control and your own management of your source. You could also do that if you want to work collaboratively with someone else. You could create a shared repo where you're both contributors. You could connect those things up to SmartThings. One thing to mention as far as kind of the data model for all of this, and as far as how this works with publication requests, when you create a publication request, if I go back, there's my test account. You can see a lot of them. If I go, let me flip back to this account. So if I go back to this publication request, click on it, it'll list the links to my local files that I've submitted. Those things, that code gets used to generate pull requests within the system repositories, but separate copies of these things are created for publication. So if you go back and edit this later, you're not changing the copy, obviously, that was published and it's being used by the community. You can, however, go back and make changes and resubmit changes and go through the publication request process again and make updates. So, but you are working in separate copies of these things in your private account, and the same is true if we go back to ones you pull down from the SmartThings repo. This is a separate copy from the SmartThings platform point of view. It's a separate copy in your account. These devices and apps can be installed by your account, but not everyone else until you've gone through the publication process. That's all I had, unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Bob. All right, so there are a few other things. I mean, I'm assuming most of the people in this room know about the sort of the announcements from last week, but a quick recap. They're mostly about rolling out the platform vision that we thought of back in the Kickstarter days, where the community of everyone is sort of able to contribute and share and like sort of remix different smart apps and devices into one platform that could sort of like manage all of the things in your home. At the same time, we released the new app, which you probably also all downloaded. There's going to be a quick update soon for iOS that will come out, and the Android app is actually coming along very nicely as well. So hopeful that is earlier part of June. In addition, part of the reason why we did the update to the mobile apps was to be able to facilitate the discovery and sharing and finding of all these different smart apps that we expect to be created by the community. And so the biggest new addition to the app was the smart setup, where you basically go to add anything like devices or actions and things, and you can even search in there and find like anything from like elder care to pet scenarios to mailbox monitor, all sorts of things that you can sort of like add into your home. So the app was updated mostly to accommodate that. also to like eliminate a few of the like things like the 3 different home pages. Now it's all in the dashboards, but still things view is still there prominently if you want. There's a question. Go past it. Jumping off, got another meeting and stuff. All right, that's all Gilbert said.
Sorry, didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's cool. And the other big news from the last week was, in addition to like opening up to the community, which is like you guys, it's also opened up more for partners and solutions providers, such as like installation services, the cross-country home services that we have a deal with to basically help install. But that's, I think, just the very first of the professional services layers that we could add on in the future. I think there'll be many more. And so the app and the platform is all just about that. And I think it's well timed. It's also well received. The media still, they sort of view us as like the major startup in the industry here. There's a lot of other ones that have like one device or that sort of thing, but as a platform, I think that we're still it. And I think even after we get news of what Apple might be doing, it will still be in that place securely, because it seems like they're going to be focusing mostly on devices. And so in addition to that, hopefully they'll be doing more education to the consumer so that everyone will be sort of more knowledgeable about this space, and I think that'll help everyone in it. So that kind of is news from the announcements sort of thread. I do want to get some feedback on the community forums. I know that there was a few bumps in the release of that. Most notably there's 2 most notable bumps. One is there's still some content from the old sites that I want to create some redirects for and pull it over into the new site, notably Arduino documentation, because we don't currently have that in the docs itself, which we'll rectify as well. But also, people's projects and a few of the blog posts, we'll get those moved over as soon as we can. The other thing that have happened that we didn't show up in any of our testing was all the emails that we all got from every single like post that we'd ever been a part of on Build. So hopefully that didn't cause too much disruption in your email inboxes. So what do you guys think? Do you have any other comments or questions about the site? Gilbert, you have been using Google Cache, because I've tried Google Cache a few times, and I haven't been able to have much luck on it. But
on the more popular sites, it's available, but not everything's there. But my question is whether or not the entire build site is going to be available. The old build site.
The content from the old build site will be available. I don't believe that we'll keep the forum up in any meaningful way. I think all of the content in the topics and forum posts is already migrated over. So what we're missing is blog posts, which were only from us, and there was only a couple dozen. Projects, which was people's posts that they kind of had their own miniature blog. I think we'll try to figure out a way to like at least identify those, but that content probably will not come over either. And then lastly, there was a few resources on the site, like the Arduino stuff, that we definitely do want to move over. Yeah. So those will be available, and yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Good to know that that's not all lost information.
It's not lost. Nope. So, Kevin, you're saying you can't find the 514 developer hour. It actually is there. I'll put a link in. So everything's kind of getting moved around, and I found a new. I guess I point to the videos in the from the new forum, but I'll send a link into the chat here in a second. I think what we're seeing is like the developer discussions on YouTube aren't really like adhering to their dates, but I'm not sure why. Let me look. All right, what else while I'm looking at that? Maybe a fairly. All right. There's the direct link to that video. I'll just make sure that it's in the right category and everything. Potentially did not get added to the right playlist. Did not. There you go. All right. Maybe a fairly short call, unless you guys have a lot of things to talk about. Hopefully. All right. Well, what else do we got? You know, Erman's at the coffee shop waiting for his car repair. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But it would be more fun to like just sort of troll him and pretend what he's saying. Let's see. No, nothing. No other questions yet. Anyone see the new, product announcement that we had today? New Aeon, oh no, was it Aeon? Oh, yeah, Aeon Labs Z-Wave Mini Mote. So I think that's a new 8 button. You have 8 buttons now to control, and I think there's a new smart app called something button manager, smart button manager. I think that's a pretty cool device, and especially it's nice. Some people are already calling it the spouse control device because they don't want to use the phone. They'd rather just push the buttons. So maybe that's true. There's some questions. So Steve's asking Bob how documentation is going to be handled for published smart apps and device types. So are you talking about specifically ones published from the community, Steve? Yeah. So Bob, that one's to you.
Yeah. So I mean, there's kind of two aspects of that. We're working some of that out. I mean, as far as documenting the code, that's kind of up to you to include or not include what kinds of comments you want. But as far as kind of the metadata for the app, as you know, we just rolled out this new user interface that has a lot of content that's associated with new apps and device types. And we've talked about that, and I think we're going to kind of deal with that as we get submissions that come in. So I think what is likely is if you submit a new device type, as part of the approval process, you'll be contacted initially, not through the IDE, but eventually we'll build tools there for doing this as well. It'll be more by email and more ad hoc, but there'll probably be a back and forth with you about as far as where we see this showing up, because we don't, our current metadata model, while it does have a category for smart apps, it doesn't have all of the data for having the app or the device show up in the Plus experience in the right place. And that's partially because we were developing these two things in parallel. And so I think the first couple of examples here will be more of a informal ad hoc process until we really nail down what kind of of additional information is appropriate for various types of apps and devices as they're submitted.
All right. Steve says thanks. Got two more questions. Greg is asking about, some of my apps in iOS were moved into the dashboard sections that are not as I would have them set up. Is there a way to move items from one dashboard to another? So I am interested in specifics on that, Greg, and maybe like, are you looking for something like something's in damage and danger, but you'd prefer it to be in something else? As you type that, I'm going to also read Derek's question. On Android, he's noticed that the away mode doesn't change to away mode after you leave until you open the app and SmartThings app actually realizes that you're gone. Is this consistent, Derek, or is it a new behavior? First question. And then second, do you have to open the SmartThings app, or can you open like Google Maps or another geolocating app? So you said you have to open the SmartThings app. That's strange. What I've seen before for my behavior, although it's been way better in the last like 4 months or whatever, but the phone actually doesn't know where I am. The GPS has been turned off or like is in standby or something. And so I would test that just to see like if it's any location monitoring app or if it is SmartThings specifically. And then you might be able to have a setting in that phone that is basically keeps GPS on more. I don't know how Android does that. I know Apple made some changes and then changed things back recently with how they use GPS, and that's helped. Greg is giving more information. So you have a light app that shows up in Mode Magic. I wouldn't normally look under Mode Magic for lighting. Okay, so Mode Magic, and that's a weird manifestation, I think, of things. I don't consider Mode Magic real dashboard, but it is. It's like it's a classification of apps, and so I would think that you could accomplish. Yeah, I guess the lighting app. It's just in there. Most of the lighting things I think you can do in the lights and switches dashboard, but I'm not sure if you can change how easily it is to change apps right now from one to the other. I think that's up to the device maker or the smart app maker, right, Bob?
Right, and I think this is something that we see evolving. The focus of the Plus initiative was primarily on the solution apps, but we needed, with the new model to have a place for these other apps to appear. And so the approach that was taken, in the interest of not changing everything, like not only coming up with the Plus interface, but I think some refactoring of apps and categories is in order, but we didn't want to take all of that change on at the same time. And so I think this is something that will, change over time. What's happening now is whatever the category was for the app, if you install that app, it now shows up in the dashboard under a module that has that category name. And so I see some refactoring of those categories happening going forward. Probably some deprecating of apps. We have a lot of apps that date back to over a year to when the system originally came out, and as Ben said, are better handled with some of the solution modules now. We also plan, although this isn't going to be imminent, we have a bit more work to do here, but we plan on opening up the ability to develop apps to not just be these standalone apps that show up in their own category modules, but eventually to allow people to add use cases to the lights and switches and doors and locks and home and family and so forth. And so while the initial versions of those were very prescriptive and very fixed, we're going to be reworking and already have done some of the underpinnings for allowing use cases to be written in a way that if you have a lighting app, it can show up as a use case in the main lights and switches module if you want. And also eventually, allowing people to develop whole modules. There might be a security module or a green energy module or something like that. So those things are all, planned. For now, we stuck with the categories as they were defined, which is not really optimum in some cases.
Yeah, Greg, I think that's the right way to do it. I think for me, I'm trying to actually minimize the number of dashboards I have, and so if I have like one thing under Green Living and one thing under Mode Magic, if I could try to accomplish those elsewhere, I do try it. Why don't you give me an email after this? It's Ben at smartthings.com, and I can sort of see what else we can talk about in terms of like what you're experiencing and get more feedback on that, because I think it's an important thing that's like a little bit nuanced for a lot of folks, but you're experiencing that, and I think current customers are going to experience it even more than like new customers, because we already have so many apps installed or whatever. So let just follow up with me after this, if you would. Derek is asking about Tasker integration. I know that some people in the community have done it. Derek, I guess you weren't one of them. I think that there's some Tasker people on the build I'm gonna still call it the build site, but on the community site, I'll have to double check as to where that is. People were doing some pretty cool stuff with it. I noticed, I haven't looked at it recently, but a month ago or so. So a quick search just of the forum shows about a dozen results for Tasker. So I would do a similar thing. Someone is actually asking about it. Someone saw it from office hours once. But yeah, I don't know. Take a look. All right. I know that we got Taryn joined a bit after most of the stuff today, but do you have any specific questions, Taryn, that you want to type in, or anything that what brought you to join the call today? All right. Stealthy at work. That's good. Not like Gilbert, who was on earlier, and he said that he thinks about smart things all day at work and can't think about his real job. Nice. So Taryn is watching that many, watching a lot of the episodes or the recordings after the fact. Good. Well, I'll continue to put them up there on YouTube then. Let's see. Yeah, I've got the Withings Connect app as well, but I haven't looked at the integration recently, so I can help with that.
Yeah, I think this is. We have a couple of these apps where you have to, if you don't go all the way through the installation process, they're trying to be too clever about the uninstall button, and they don't let you get rid of them. And I think I know that was a problem with one of the other connection manager apps we had. It might be the problem that Craig's seeing with the Withings right now as well.
All right, Kevin. Thanks for joining. I think we'll hang out here if there's any more questions, but if there are no more questions, we could call it a little bit early today. All right. Well, Taryn's got one. I'm gonna wait for that. Hue light statuses, yes. So updates and like getting the statuses actually to show up in the app. I just sort of reached out to one of our engineering leads about this, and if there's any people that are currently looking at Hue and improving that. I know there has been some issues with state changing and delays for actions firing Hue. I'm in pretty close contact with the support team, and they, just by way of hearing what they're talking about, I know that that's an issue with Hue. So you're not alone. I'm not sure that helps you much. Are you connecting through the Hue Hub, I'm assuming? So Hue Hub, and then Hue Hub connects to SmartThings Hub? All right. Right. Yeah, that's the one bad thing about the Hue lights and switches. There's been some talk on the community side about what kinds of switches, in-wall switches, you can get that could potentially always give power to the Hues. And I've even heard of people do like tape their switches up or put dummy switches in so that it's not accessible via the switch. But that's obviously pretty extreme. I can't keep my switches in the right state in my house for the Hue bulbs because my wife does not want to go into the app for them. Yeah, no, we have to figure out some sort of a solution for that. If Ermin were here, I think he would have a bit more to say about that. Bob, you worked with the TCP lights at all, or no?
I have worked with them a little bit. I mean, I didn't do I've installed some and used them. I know the case with the Hue, it's a question of, even the Hue app doesn't assume that just because it can't talk to the bulb that it's off, which of course it is, but if it's off because it's not powered down. So it's kind of a tricky problem. In general with, it's kind of it seems like everyone's spouse has the same issue where you can't, it just doesn't work to say, use the app or whatever. But so it's a tricky problem, but we are looking at what we could do to be at least a little bit better with the Hue.
Nice, Taryn. You're one of the rare people with with half instead of WAF, husband acceptance factor. I've met a few though. So in fact, Stacy Higginbotham from GigaOhm, she's one of those guys with one of those gals with the husband acceptance factor issue.
Right. Yeah, I said spouse, not wife.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Right. Greg asked a question I think is a good one about the rule builder, which we've been experimenting with, but haven't rolled out yet. I think this is a question that we have as well. To what degree it becomes a problem of user discovery as well, which is the approach of having hundreds or potentially thousands of smart apps that do very similar things versus having a smaller number of more general ones. And our thoughts, we don't have anything that's immediately ready for release, but our thought here is it's not an either or thing, and that rule builders doing complex things with a rule builder, kind of requires a programmer. Even if you get rid of having to actually write code, it becomes a kind of cognitively difficult thing. And what we see is really a combination of things, apps which do things simply, but then may have embedded rule builders to kind of take care of the corner cases, because some of our early experience with the apps were that, even amongst ourselves, people would write a set of, half a dozen apps, and the next person would look at them and say, well, this one does almost what I want, but not quite. And so I'm going to write another version of that. And so, the question is, what is going to be the easiest for the end user to deal with? Will it be lots of versions of apps that all do very specific things, or perhaps ones that are simpler and have rule builder embedded at some point where it's close to doing what they want, but they really don't want to turn the light off under some circumstance or want to add another condition for turning it off. So I think we are going to want to make progress on the rule builder, and I think to some extent it will reduce the tendency to see a very large proliferation of relatively simple apps that just differ in subtle ways. But I think that'll probably be a good thing for the community at large, not to have to find the one that does exactly what you want, but find one that's close and then tweak the rules, in kind of the more additional settings section to get the behavior you want.
Yeah. So I mean.
And so, yeah, that's exactly the. Sorry, Greg. That's exactly the issue. We want to try to move this down to the point where you don't have to make the kind of the leap of going from configuring an app to installing the IDE and writing code just in order to turn the closet door off 5 minutes after you opened it or something like that.
Right. So we're leaning towards a less of a generic rule builder, as Bob was mentioning, to one that's more like, oh, you haven't been able to find something that works like you want within lights and switches. You can extend something or do a little something for those people who have maybe the programmer's logical mind, but syntactically haven't caught up with that. So Greg, sounds like you might be one of those folks. For me, it's really an issue of having an interface around it that is intuitive, and we just haven't done that yet. So looking at trying to get that in at some point soon. All right. More. Nice. Thanks, Taryn. Yeah, Greg, for your Sonoses, do you have them grouped? Yeah, that's the one thing I've found still is that's the hard part is getting the groups to stay together. But right now, it's been working pretty well for me. I have it. My use case is when anyone opens the first time the refrigerator door opens every day, tell me the weather. And I wanted it to be only in the kitchen Sonos, but usually it's in the whole group. And so my master bedroom Sonos also tells me the weather. So what that means is at like 5:30 when I don't want to be up, I'm still hearing the weather when my wife opens the fridge. So how that goes. All right. Well, once a day apps. Well, the worst for Greg is like sometimes like it's late, like 12:01 at midnight, after midnight, and I'll like it'll fire in that time, and then I won't get it in the morning. All right. Mail notification. I have a mail notification app. One of my Sonos is pushing notification. Yeah. Yeah, I don't do mail notification. I don't do once a day because I don't get too many false positives, but I just get a lot. I probably get 2 or 3 mail notifications a day. Okay, my mailbox is inside one set of doors, so that helps. Unless someone slams the door. All right. So quick poll for the remaining people in the call. What time would work best for a call like this? We're 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. What are other people's schedules looking like? 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Eastern, Greg? And then Taryn, are you East Coast as well? All right. We've got a lot of East Coasters here. I have a feeling it is harder for Central, Mountain, and Pacific. So we might end up doing more of the later calls at some point coming up. I think that those were popular for many of the people. I think Todd can join more easily after that. So yeah, we'll try to find it, or maybe we'll just keep varying it. That's harder to plan for, but we'll see how it goes. Well, thanks everyone for joining today, and as always, follow along on the community site. Send us your topics that you're super interested in. Maybe I should try to do like a roundup or something of like the common, the biggest questions on the community site each week or whatever. But go to this place and comment on these sessions, and we'll add them to the agenda for next time. Great. Well, thanks again, and see you either next week or the following week, depending on how ambitious I am. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.